afternoon, everyone. I hope you are having a good Monday. We are pleased to have you with us. Thank you for joining us for our first mental health seminar of the academic year 2024-25 and our first well-being day of the year. As many of you may remember, we launched an intentional campus-wide conversation in 2021 in response to our global mental health pandemic. With these seminars, we seek to support our Carolina community and give our faculty, staff, and students valuable tools to help themselves and each other. Our seminars are led by a leader in our community who can help teach and guide us in a discussion and assist us in reducing stigma surrounding mental health issues, encouraging help-seeking behavior, and making it easy to connect with campus resources. We recognize that one of our best assets in addressing and supporting our mental health is Carolina's culture of compassion and care, which we used as a foundation for creating our Heals Care Network initiative and website at care.unc.edu. We plan to draw upon that foundation extensively in our conversation today. And today we'll focus on a topic that is timely for us, which is how to maintain a healthy balance and sense of well-being during the lead up to a major election, when it seems we are inundated with political advertising, election messages, and guidance regarding how to vote. So today, guided by our expert facilitator, Dr. Megan Pruette, we'll explore the emotional challenges that the election cycles can bring and their effects on our mental health. Our goal today will be to learn about some practical strategies we can employ to stay grounded, manage stress, and build resilience during the election season. We're glad to have you with us today, as I mentioned, and I'm optimistic that today is going to be a very engaging and interactive session. Before I introduce our facilitator today, I have just a few key notes to help you navigate this seminar. First, the chat function is live for participants to communicate with each other and our production team. The Q&A is enabled and anonymous questions are allowed. Participants will be able to see all questions, including unanswered ones, and then they can also upvote any questions that they also would like to see answered. Our facilitator will address questions at the end of the presentation. And also for those of you who are with us today, students, and are interested in CLE credit, that will be an option. We will provide the QR code at the end of the session today, so you'll have that available. So again, I'm pleased to welcome everyone. I'm Amy Johnson, the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at Carolina, and we are very pleased to have with us Dr. Megan Pruette, an adult psychiatrist and the course director of the psychiatry course at UNC School of Medicine. She's engaged in medical education for students and residents with a focus on building a strong alliance with patients to promote optimal care. With this, Dr. Pruette maintains a passion for patient care and education. She treats adult patients on an outpatient basis using both medications and therapy to support them in reaching their own goals and living up to their own values. She earned her undergraduate degree at Clemson University, her master's in biological anthropology and anatomy at Duke, and her MD here at Carolina. Megan, we greatly appreciate your willingness to lead us in this discussion today and look forward to the conversation. I will turn the program over to you.
Thank you. We are having a few difficulties getting the panelist on the Zoom call, but I'm hopeful that she'll be here in just a second. So I'm on the phone with her right now, so stand by a couple more minutes and I think we'll be able to get going. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Oh no. Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes, Megan, we can.
Okay, wonderful. It says I can't turn on my video because it's been disabled.
I'll work on that. Thank you.
Let me see if I can share screen at least. I'm so excited to be here. I'm sorry for all of the confusion with everything.
Ava, I think you might have to do the video permissions for her now that you're host.
I'm not seeing an option available. Would it be okay to make Megan the host?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Perfect.
All right. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. And how about my video? Is that on yet? No.
Yep, I think we're good to go.
Oh, okay. So you can see me because I can't see y'all anymore. All right. So I am really excited to be here today to talk to y'all about the election coming up and strategies for sort of staying calm, cool, and collected during this super intense time. Let's see. Okay. Um, Okay, so let's get excited. It's election season, right? We have a lot of new voters on today, a lot of people excited to use their voice for the first time. And it should be an exciting time to sort of participate in this wonderful democracy that we have. But I'm sure if you guys have been seeing any of the headlines, it's been more information kind of like this. And these are just some headlines I picked from, a quick Google search. And I'm sure that many people, by the end of sort of seeing all of this, it can be very overwhelming and feel like you just are ready to check out from the whole situation because it's too much to manage. So let's see what we can do about that. So if we look at some of the data that's been collected recently, about half of Americans are saying that the politics has negatively impacted their mental health. 1 in 10 people are losing sleep over this. And the top 5 concerns that have been raised are concern for misinformation, concern over the election outcome, more political violence, polarization and solar division, and then media coverage and bias. And all of those are pretty significant. So what we're going to talk about today is how to manage your anxiety. And then once your anxiety is at a place that you can work with it, how to work with your anxiety. So first off, what is anxiety? So it's just a general, diffuse, unpleasant, vague sense of apprehension. I'm sure all of us have experienced this at some point. But what I want to focus on with anxiety is that some anxiety can be a good thing. It's just when it gets too high, it can be a problem. So some anxiety can be motivating. It can help you to work hard, to practice, to prepare, to study. But too much anxiety can be debilitating. I'm just checking on the video one more time. No, I still can't do the video. Okay.
Yep, we're still working on it.
Okay, just wanted to check. So I'm going to go over this concept called the zone of tolerance. Another name for it is the window of tolerance. If we look at anxiety on a scale, on one side of the scale, we have no anxiety. In the middle, we have our zone of tolerance. And on the other side, we have too much anxiety. So I like to think about this like no anxiety, you're like a cat, right? Like you're aloof, apathetic. You couldn't care one way or the other what is happening with anything. That's what happens when there's no anxiety in the situation. When you have too much anxiety in the situation, you can be like a deer caught in headlights. I'm sure some of you guys have heard that phrase before, fight or flight. More recently, we've added a phrase, fight, flight, or freeze. And so that's what can happen when you have too much anxiety. It can be debilitating. You feel like you can't do anything, or you maybe are more reactionary with your emotions than you'd want to be. So the zone of tolerance is where we want to be. That is like this cute little dog looking at his bone. He's smiling. He's thinking like, yes, I'm feeling good about today. It's either his birthday or he's going to a birthday party and he's going to get a bone and it's going to be awesome. And he's like dressed and ready to go. So that's the sweet spot. That is where we want to be with our anxiety. So how do you get to your zone of tolerance with your anxiety? Well, we're going to go over three general strategies. The first is to be present. The second one is self-care. And the third one is to build compassion for others. And all three of these will help to reduce your anxiety. So the first one is be present. So being present, the components of that we're going to talk about are mindfulness, thought blocking, and turning off your notifications on your phone. So what is mindfulness? People talk about it all the time. They always say it's super important, be mindful, practice mindfulness, blah, 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 blah. So mindfulness at its very core is meta attention towards your own mind in the present. So we're going to go over an example of that. So let's say you're this girl and you say, I am angry. So when you say I'm angry or I'm so angry, you are completely embodying the feeling. You are the feeling. You have no room in your being for anything else except for anger in that feeling. So one way that we can move towards having more meta attention towards this, towards your emotions, would be to use the word I feel angry. So now you are not embodied by anger. You are not equal to anger. You're feeling angry. You might be thinking something else. You might be touching something else. You can have all these different sensations when you're just feeling angry. So that's one sort of step away from the emotion that allows you to have a little bit of space between you and your emotion. So the next step in stepping away, which would be more of a mindfulness, is I notice the feeling of anger. So you're noticing the feeling, like you might notice the thought, or you might notice a lot of feelings at the same time. They come, they go, you notice them. So you're able to step away, see the feeling come up and leave. Notice it's there, note it. There's important information in your feelings, but you don't have to embody it and you don't have to be taken over by it. That's the principle of mindfulness. All right, the next way we're going to talk about being present is to use thought blocking. Now, when you notice a thought, you can do a lot actually to turn off that thought or intentionally block that thought. So this woman right here who's breathing deeply, she's thinking about the election, but then she says, I'm not going to think about that right now, and I am choosing to focus on my breath. So here are some techniques that people use for thought blocking. One is to use a mantra. A popular one is this too shall pass. So when you use your mindfulness to notice that these thoughts are coming up, notice that these anxious feelings are coming up, you can use a mantra to say, I'm not going to do that now, or this too shall pass. And it sort of makes your brain redirect to a different direction. Another idea would be to set a timer. So some people, if they give themselves, we call it worry time, if they give themselves some worry time, they just need to spend that time worrying and then they're done. So in this example, the person says, I will think about the election for 30 minutes, then I'm not going to think about it for the rest of the day. Some people do that, like I'm going to think about um, whatever's worrying me when I'm in the shower. And then when I'm out of the shower, I start my day. And so sometimes allowing yourself that space to get a little bit anxious and worried and then let you stop it and then go the rest of your day without it overcoming you. Another idea for thought blocking would be to use visualizations. So some people, a popular one is to close your eyes and see a calm river flowing past you. And then you take your thought and you put it on a leaf and you watch it float away down the river. And it's beautiful and peaceful, and your thought will just flow down the river. And that always feels really good when it works that way. Sometimes you have so many thoughts or so much, you're so activated that your river is more like a water rafting, and the leaves are all swirling, twirling, and that's okay. It takes practice. It takes practice to make your river nice and calm. But this is one way that you can sort of change your thoughts. And then last way that I like to use, it's one of my preferential ways. Oh, my video is working. Wonderful. One of my preferential ways is to use humor. And so sometimes these thoughts come up and they come up over and over and over. And just stopping it and being like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of this. Why does my brain keep on bringing up the election? I'm going to change the channel. I don't want to watch this rerun anymore. Um, this doesn't work as much now with younger people because you guys aren't limited to just like TBS and TNT and all these channels that used to rerun the same shows over and over and over. But back in the day, sometimes you'd get bored watching TV and you would just want to change the channel because you're like, God, I've seen it so many times, I can't do it again. So those are the the 4 ways that you can try thought blocking. So using a mantra, setting a timer, visualizations, and humor. Okay, so the last way we're going to talk about being present is to turn off your notifications. So I like to think that your attention is your most valuable resource. So notifications are bad for a multitude of reasons, but we're going to talk about just a few costs of notifications coming up on your phone or on your email or any of these little pop-ups that happen. So one is interrupted thoughts. So you have to get some type of momentum going in your thoughts to move forward. They don't just come instantly and then you have a complete well-rounded thought that's just perfect. You got to get going a little bit, right? And if you're constantly interrupted in your thoughts, then you aren't able to get the momentum you need, to get the momentum you need to get a clear, cohesive thought in. So notifications and interruptions will stop you from getting that momentum going. There's also a significant mental burden of task switching. So every time we switch our task, if we're typing something and then we look at our phone and then a friend comes and says hi to us, each one of those things, our brain has to like click, it has to switch over to whatever we're doing and then click, come back. And that is a lot on our brain. It's very taxing on our brain to be able to do that. So maybe you can do it some, but it would be more exhausting than if you were able to just sit and complete one task at a time. Another reason or cost of notifications is a loss of time. I'm sure everyone here has experienced when you get a little ding on your phone and you look at your phone and you're like, okay, well, I need to text this person. And then all of a sudden, 20 minutes later, you're like, what? Why did I pick up my phone? I was doing something else, right? The time flies by. We get distracted by other things. We lose a lot of time by just constantly being notified of things and then getting distracted. And then the last cost that I put up here for notifications to me is the most significant one because you lose autonomy of your own thoughts. And what I mean by that is that Your attention, like I said, is your greatest resource. You can put your attention where you want, when you want, and decide what you want to pay attention to. Okay. If you have a notification, the way our brains work, just the way that we evolved and the way they work, is all of a sudden your attention is now shot over to whatever that notification is, right? So you have now lost control or autonomy over what you are choosing to pay attention to because this notification sort of snapped over here, grabbed your attention, and now you're on that. So I think it's really a loss of control of how you want to choose to spend your time because it's being interrupted by other things. Those are the reasons that I listed for turning off notifications. So we talked about being present, using mindfulness, thought blocking, and turning off notifications. Next, we're going to talk about self-care. And self-care includes hobbies, relationships, and self-compassion. All right, self-care, hobbies. Everybody needs a hobby. Everybody needs to have a hobby that is just for fun that they engage in on a regular basis. So it can be sports, it can be photography, it can be art, writing, music. It really doesn't matter. It just has to be something that you enjoy doing. And the trick about a hobby that can be kind of hard is that it has to be completely for pleasure, no other reason. Sometimes people say, well, I play basketball, but that helps me stay fit. Great. Are you enjoying every moment of that basketball? If you are, that's fine. If it's something that is added to your to-do list so that you can stay fit, that is not what I'm looking for. Many times, it's hard to actually embody the self-care. And part of having a hobby that is only about enjoying it and nothing else is it allows you to embody the concept that you enjoy, you deserve happiness and enjoyment and calm and peace. And so until you are able to actually embody and do that, you can say it all you want, and it's not going to happen. So I really, really, really suggest that you get a hobby that's for no other reason than just for you to enjoy it. Relationships. It's super important for all of us to stay connected to our families and friends. That's what makes life rich and fulfilling. And I think we all know that our lives get a little bit chaotic. So sometimes we have to like proactively put our friends in the calendar. It's not, if you're just waiting to run into somebody, it's probably not going to happen. So you can plan to have meals or coffee with people. You can go on outings, like you can go out dancing or to a music or for a walk. And then sometimes even planning a phone call can be really, really important. Um, Making time for your friends and putting them in your calendar is is how you can maintain relationships. Okay. Our last part of self-care is self-compassion. So being kind to yourself when you aren't at your best. So self-compassion means giving yourself grace and not using the shoulda, woulda, couldas that we all use sometimes. Oh, holy moly. Now my computer went crazy. I don't know if you guys can even see it. Oh my goodness. Mhm. Okay. So, self-compassion, giving yourself grace. We all use these shoulda, woulda, couldas all the time. So let's say, oops, I'm going to be one slide behind that. So you should have studied more. You would have done better on your test. You could be a good student if you weren't lazy. People say these things all the time. But what can be more helpful to say are things like, I didn't do as well as I wanted. I know I am smart enough and I can do well when I prioritize studying. I'll do better next time. Those are examples of self-compassion. So we all fall down, we all scrape our knees, and it's just part of being a person. It's not a big deal. And it's just about getting back up. So I think giving ourselves grace when you're struggling is so important. Okay, so we talked about self-care, which included hobbies, relationships, and self-compassion. And now we're going to talk about building compassion for others. All right, so this is going to include 3 again. So assuming the best in others, listening to understand, not respond, and finding similarities with others. Okay, so assuming the best. So many times we make assumptions about other people's intentions, and not all the time, but many, many times, the only person it affects is yourself. It affects your own mood, your own thoughts, and your own perceptions of the world. The other person, they're just going about your life, and you made this whole story around somebody that's just putting you in a bad mood. So here's an example that happens to me with an embarrassing amount of frequency. So I'm driving, right? I'm driving my minivan. This is me up here feeling all grouchy with my kids screaming in the back or whatever. And somebody passes me in their car, and I think, well, what a jerk. He passed on the right. He's obviously a self-centered and entitled narcissist. I like, I, I'm just so angry that he's even in my presence that he did this. And now I'm fuming, right? So this guy doesn't care. He's still got a smile on his face. He has no idea I'm having these thoughts about him. Okay. So then if I, with purpose and thought, just try to make a neutral story or even a positive story about why he might have passed me, I feel better. So I might say, like, oh my gosh, he's in a hurry. I hope everything's okay for him. Let's hope that, his family is okay, because I'm sure that's why he's speeding. It doesn't actually matter why he was speeding or why he passed me on the right or anything. The only thing that is affecting me is the story that I choose to make about it. So that's why sometimes just purposely assuming the best in others and making your stories for other people's behaviors and actions, either neutral or positive, really changes your perception of how you interact with people in the world. Okay, this is a hard one, and this is sort of coming up into the um, election cycle. So listening to understand, not respond. So approaching people with opposing views with curiosity, not going into battle, right? So, oh, I wonder why you think that, or, I never thought of things that way. Can you tell me more? Responding with open-ended questions when you're being told something that maybe you don't agree with, and you might still just not agree with it because y'all two have different values, right? Or you might not understand it, or you've never seen that perspective before. And so trying to go into these conversations with humility and really listening to understand what the person is saying and where they're coming from. I think avoiding the urge to educate or to teach people can be really, really hard, right? We want to spew out facts and information, telling people exactly this, that, the other. And a lot of times that can just fuel a conversation and make it get really heated really quickly. So, avoiding that urge and really trying to understand what the person is saying can be helpful. Okay. And the last part of building compassion for others is to find similarities. So, y'all all know that we are almost identical with our DNA, right? And if we want to get away from the DNA part of it, then we all experience the same emotions: happy, sad, angry, jealous. All of these things are part of just the general human experience. So I want to challenge y'all to um, find common ground with people that you differ from. So, yes, your differences might be large and they might be sort of feeling like they separate you from the person, but there is something common. If it's only the fact that you're both human, there is something common. And you can choose to focus on that when you're working with people with differing views to understand them as a person. I also really want to encourage everyone to avoid othering people. I think that we very quickly can put people in a box based on one fact about them. Like maybe they go to church every Sunday, so they're conservative, so they're Republican, so they hate Trump. And it's like, whoa, where did we get that from? The person you're talking to is a very complex human with a lot of different things contributing to their history, to their personality, to how they're feeling today versus yesterday. So going at people inquisitively and not sort of putting them in this other box can be very helpful. So we talked about building compassion for others, which means assuming the best in others, listening to understand, and finding similarities with people that we differ from. Okay. So I know that's a lot because each little section had three. But if we're going to reduce our anxiety, we want to be present, engage in self care regularly, and build compassion for others. And all three of those things will help to reduce anxiety. And then you can get to your zone of tolerance. So before you can do these things, you're usually in the spot where it's too much anxiety. So you're either like reactive with your emotions, you're irritable, or you freeze, or you just run away from it all. You're like, can't do it, not today, right? So engaging in these three practices will really help you be able to maintain your anxiety in the zone of tolerance or the window of tolerance. And that's a sweet spot. So we talked about how to manage our anxiety, and now we're going to talk about how we can work with it once it's in that zone of tolerance. All right. So you've been doing all your self-care. You are this wonderful dog that is just so like motivated, inspired, energized, ready to be productive. He has all the energy and drive and mental capacity to do something. And all this anxiety is giving him that so that he can move forward and take action with this emotion. So we're going to talk for a second about the circles. Um, So this, for example, is your circle of control. I mean, your circle of concern. So your circle of concern is pretty big. That's anything you're concerned about in the whole world. Your brother, your sister, freedom, democracy, equality, big, big concepts are all in your circle of concern. Your circle of influence is smaller than your circle of concern. And your circle of influence is basically just the things you can influence. So the thoughts of those around you and the actions of those around you. Note that you can't control any of that, but you can influence it. And then we've got your circle of control. So those are the things that you directly control, which is basically your own actions, your own thoughts, and your own time management. So, what happens a lot of the time is that we spend a whole lot of our brain power worried about our circle of concern, right? Which is frustrating because a lot of it we can't do anything about. So, when you're sitting there thinking, like, oh, it's so important that everyone's treated equally, and then your brain's like "Brrr," going on and on forever about it, you're not actually doing anything. So, you have all of this anxiety with no action behind it. So, it's even more frustrating and demoralizing when you spend so much time in your circle of concern. So, moving your focus to the circle of control allows you to use your anxiety for accomplishments, for actions. So, you could volunteer for political organizations, you could spend your time learning more about political issues, you could talk to people, and you can vote. So, those are all things that you do that you have control over. And as you focus on your circle of control, your circle of influence will grow. So that's kind of the magic of it, is once we're able to like narrow down and focus on what I can do, we're able to influence more people. So, what do you do with your zone of tolerance anxiety? You focus on what you can control, your own actions, thoughts, and time. Okay, so we kind of flew through, but if we're going to step back and summarize, calm amidst the campaign. Step one is to manage your anxiety, so it can be useful. So, being present, engaging in self care, and building compassion for others. And step two is to use the motivation your anxiety gives you. Focus on what you can control and watch your circle of influence grow. All right. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. In particular, I was taking down some notes and I knew about the circle of influence control and concern before, but to have that visualized again was very helpful. I'm going to keep that in mind personally. So I hope others found it as useful as I did. So now, folks, we have reached the opportunity for everyone to ask questions of Dr. Pruette. So please, if you would, pop those questions into the Q&A so that we can see them. And actually, I think the chat may also be available to you, but Q&A will help us be able to allow folks to upvote and so forth. So if you could do your questions or include your questions there, that would be terrifically helpful. We did have a couple of questions that we received in advance that I wanted to pitch to you while we're waiting for folks to upload theirs into the Q&A. So one of these, I think, is something that all of us can relate to. So how can individuals with differing political views navigate conversations with loved ones without sacrificing their mental health and well-being, particularly during this time? I think all of us have people in our families who have different sort of political views than we do. And how do we maintain that sense of ballast without allowing the fact that it's our loved ones who in particular, are contributing potentially to this sense of concern and sacrificing our well-being a little bit?
Yeah, I think that is such a great question. And I really encourage people to focus on why that relationship is important to them and remember that going into the conversations. So if it's a family member and family is incredibly important to stay connected to, grounding yourself in that thought that my family is important to me can help you before you go into the conversation. And then doing everything you can to um, steer away from things that sort of cause conflict and moving the conversation towards things that you have in common, because you have a lot of things in common with family members in particular, maybe not your political views, but maybe a lot of other things. And so trying to find things that are more neutral, especially during this time of high conflict.
Appreciate that so much. We do have a question in the Q&A here. An individual says, I have a question about how our international students can deal with the stress of an election that they have no control over.
Right, right. They have no control and they don't know what's going to happen, right? So I think thinking about what an international student can control. So can they still volunteer for a political organization, maybe? Can they sort of talk to people, talk to voters? They can't vote themselves, but and can they learn more about the issues? Maybe. I think the problem sometimes with anxiety is that it really makes us want to take action. That's what the emotion is supposed to do. It's supposed to make us take action. But there's many times in our life where we have to accept our situation, like we can't do anything about it right now. And sitting and ruminating on it for hours and hours and hours does not help anybody. And so finding that balance between when can I take action that I can do for myself in my circle of control versus when is it time for me to accept this and just see what comes. I think that's such a hard balance and hard to know when is the right thing to do.
A related question to that, because I have done some reading into this topic about whether or not, particularly if you feel anxious about an election, or, the sort of that whatever time of year the issue, sort of getting involved, whether or not getting involved and volunteering and contributing to the practice. I can imagine that there might be some variability in this, but does that actually help? Does it give people a better sense of control, or can it exacerbate the problem? And maybe you have to sort of gauge for yourself and then make a determination. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think gauging for yourself, and some of that is sort of that being present and mindfulness. So let's say you go and you decide to volunteer because you're like, I'm feeling so activated, I got to do something with this energy. I'm going to work in my circle of control, right? You go out and volunteer, but then everyone around you is just like spewing this negativity and this anxiety. And you notice, like, God, every time I come into the volunteer place, I just get so upset when I leave, right? Like I just get so like riled up. So maybe that's not the right thing for you. Or maybe there's a different way you can manage it. Like you can hang out with other people or talk to other people in the group or find something to do where you don't have to be with such a large number of people. Um, but hopefully practicing being present can help you figure out like what's good for you and like what's not good for you because everybody is different in the way they manage their emotions.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Appreciate that. Another question is, I understand to have compassion for others, and I try to do that in my daily life. However, I do not believe I should have compassion for those who hate me because I'm queer, which is prominent in certain political views. How would you go about this? Can you have compassion for someone who hates you and might want to do you harm? Wow.
Mm, that is such a good question. Um, that would take a lot of work to try to have compassion for someone who hates you. And I don't know if that's realistically something that's good to work towards. I think when I was thinking about having compassion for others, some of it is just like building that muscle of you can look around at everyone around you and think the worst of them, or you can look around at everyone around you and think the best of them, like right off the bat, right? And so, like, building the muscle of assuming the best in others takes practice. So, it's not like every time someone speeds past me and I get irritated, I'm always thinking the best in them. I'm not, but I practice trying to assume the best. And then that attitude will carry throughout other things that just generally brings your anxiety down. So
Mhm.
it's not necessarily about having compassion for the person right across from you who's being hateful towards you. It's more about building an idea where you assume the best in others first so that your anxiety can be reduced.
Right. Appreciate that. I appreciate the attendee posing that really provocative and I think very personally charged question. I think the other thing, though, that strikes me that's embedded in this question goes to a part of your presentation where you talked about othering. It is one thing if an individual is sitting directly across from you and spewing hate at you, but often what I find in working with students, we tend to express hate or a level of distrust or dislike for people that we don't know, and to remind yourself that that person very likely, particularly if they're not directly across from you, don't know you, they may just dislike, somebody based on this sense of othering and some assumptions about you that they don't have. And so to come back to this place, which is, it's not really about me, perhaps. It's that this person doesn't know me and we haven't had an opportunity to connect, and maybe to stay centered and model the behavior in others that you would want folks to reflect to you. I think that's such an important thing.
hmm I think in my practice of psychiatry, I practice outpatient at UNC. It's so interesting because we have all these sort of ideas where we group people together, and I can make tons of assumptions based on talking to someone for 10 minutes. And so sometimes I feel like it can be boring because I'm like, well, I know everything about this person because they talk to me and, I can put them in this box. But I am surprised like almost every day. I'm like, whew, that really took me by surprise. I didn't expect that in their history. And I think that that's so humbling because that helps me remember that people are so multifaceted. Um, and when we look at tendencies of people, it's like, well, 90% of the people do this. And we just jump and say, like, well, if you support, I don't want to get too inflamed, but like if you support Trump, then you hate gay people. But it's like, well, maybe like 80% of them do. I don't know. This could be like the 20% that doesn't. I don't know. Right. And I think assuming so many things based on just one thing you know about person can be quite dangerous.
Right, right. And to maybe stay centered in the place where you understand how multifaceted you are, and to sort of lend credence to the idea that that other person is very likely also that multifaceted, and you wouldn't want for somebody to make you wouldn't want to make assumptions about them. You wouldn't want them to make assumptions about you. Appreciate that a lot. Ooh, a lot.
Yeah.
That, thank you again, attendee, for that question. Okay, here's another one. So we've talked a good bit about sort of where we are right now in the election season and how we can manage what we're dealing with right now. We have a good question that I think relates to how do we manage stress and maintain resilience after the election, particularly if the election results don't tend to align with our personal values or the candidate that we really supported. How do you do it post-election as well? Much of the same tools or different strategies?
Mm. I sort of go back to these tools because they're just sort of the basics, right? So what can you focus on? What can you control? And what can you do within your circle of control? What can you do to take care of yourself so that you're in a place where you can think well and act well and not get so upset yourself that you can't really function appropriately or properly. Um, so yeah, I think working on your mindfulness or being present, um, making sure that you're filling your own cup with all your self-care, and trying to shrink down and think about what is important to you, like your family, your loved ones, your relationships, your friends, your career, what's important to you, and try to focus on that. A lot of what we're given from the news or from external sources is really only like an itty little part of what we actually experience in life. So what we experience in life is generally like the day-to-day stuff, right? Like your friends, your family, your work, your school, blah, 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 right? And if we would concentrate more on those things, then we can really work to make our life as full as we can. But if we're concentrating on all these other big grand issues that we can't do anything about, it's just distressing and it feels demoralizing.
Yeah, appreciate that. So one of the questions that we often like to ask our speakers, typically because we have a number of students in the audience especially, but we may even have some colleagues who are considering a career change or a career path. Can you tell us how you sort of hit upon your particular interest in this field and the work that you do, and any advice that you might have for one of our students who says, I'm really interested in this, or, I want to be Dr. Pruitt when I grow up. How do I pursue that?
Oh, that's a big question. I guess, well, so I started out studying biology in undergrad at Clemson, and then I went to graduate school, but I found graduate school very isolating and mostly very isolating. And I felt like I wanted to work with more people and be in a career where I was just around more people, because in graduate school, I just sat and read all the time. And that's sort of what drew me into medicine. Um, and then in medicine, when you're choosing your medical specialty, there's all kinds of different specialties you can do. And what I found I love the most in all of my rotations was learning people's stories and meeting people and becoming very intimately connected um, with them and sort of being with them in their hardest moments. And in psychiatry, you have that opportunity. And so that's really why I love to practice psychiatry and why I like outpatient particularly, because I get to meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds and just, I don't know, value the human experience and what it's like to be a person, and the struggles that we all go through.
Appreciate that a lot. Always interesting to hear how people sort of chose their path. So another question, do you have any advice for either undergraduate or graduate and professional students who are in the middle of their degrees and still sort of identifying their particular path? Anything that you did in particular that was valuable? I mean, you obviously gave us a little bit of insight as to how you chose, but anything that you would recommend for students who are sort of thinking about and trying to find that right path for them?
Gosh, that's a hard question because I felt like my path was quite circuitous. So I don't know if I want to give anyone advice, but I did.
Well, but maybe that is the advice, which is it's not a linear process for so many of us.
Right, right. Well, you know what's funny is when I finally went to medical school, my parents are like, "Well, we knew you were going to go to medical school." And I'm like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" And they were like, "Well, you had to do your own path." And so I had to, like, I just had to go to graduate school because that's what I wanted to do. I had to hate it. Very hard time in my life. And then I went to medical school and I loved it. And I think that if I went on a path that was super linear, or my parents were like, "No, you're going to be a doctor. We know you. We're your parents." And I just did what they said, I would have always thought, like, maybe I don't want to do that, or maybe that's not what I wanted. But I like really, really enjoy my career now. And I think that's because I've um, made a lot of missteps and mistakes that I got to learn from. And so I think maybe not being scared enough to take action because it's probably not going to be the right thing. And that's just part of it. And then you'll change. So it's not like sometimes I talk to students because I have some student patients. And they put so much on their decision. Like, what if I do this and I go here and everything's gonna, my whole life will end? And I'm like, no, and you're probably going to make a mistake and it's probably not going to turn out right. And that's like totally okay because then you can pivot. And so, really, just appreciating those experiences and making sure that you don't allow your anxiety to get in the way of your experience.
That's right. I think that's so appropriate and important to reinforce. Sometimes two things. You learn from the experiences that feel like home runs, and you also really learn from the experiences that teach you that's not what I want to do, or, I really feel as though I didn't succeed at that. But that there is still a tremendous amount of learning in that experience, and not to dismiss that, to take from that what you can and understand that that's normal. This happens to all of us. I think that's really important. So valuable to hear from you that you had a really negative experience, that you didn't love graduate school. And yet look indeed where you are and what you've been able to sort of glean from that and move on and turn it into something that you really do love.
Right, right.
Powerful message, students. Appreciate that so much. Okay. The last question I have is, if someone really feels as though they've gotten a lot out of this presentation, and maybe you have some additional recommendations regarding things to read, books to read, journals that you particularly follow that you like a lot, other resources that you would encourage students and colleagues to pursue, anything for somebody who said, this really whet my appetite and I'd like to learn more, where might I go?
Oh, goodness. That's a great question that I didn't anticipate in any way because I don't know if I have a resource. I sort of put it together from all my training in psychiatry, thinking about what's important with my patients and things. And I don't feel like I had one resource. I'd be happy to talk to people. I put my email address up there so people can email me, and I'd love to chat more. Um, I if anyone is interested in a type of therapy that I find especially helpful, it's called ACT, ACT. Um, and it really focuses not on necessarily changing your thoughts and not on just s- thinking about your mother all the time, right? Which is how like psychiatrists get illustrated. But it's about figuring out what your values are and what's important to you and just going towards it. And so a lot of that is I think important because we get dwelled down in all of these things. Like I could spend a lot of time thinking about my bad decision in graduate school, all the money I lost, my bad relationships, right? But I don't. I really try to think about what's important to me. I did make mistakes. How can I move forward knowing what's important to me? And so ACT therapy is the one that sort of really I have found the most helpful working with patients doing this kind of stuff.
That's great. Wonderful. Perhaps we can even add that onto the slides at the end to recommend that folks consider that if they want to read more, learn more about this. Well, I don't see any other open questions in the chat. I think that it has been a great and really valuable conversation today, certainly a timely conversation today. So I thank you so much, Dr. Megan Pruette, for being with us. And I'm so glad we got your video working, both so that we could see you. And also, had we not, we wouldn't have been able to see that great view that you have as your background, which is amazing. I want
It's
to go
like
there.
it's these panels that my husband put up for me.
So
It's
nice.
Monet, but someone one time was like, "Oh, did you paint that?" And I'm like, "No,
No,
it's Monet. Thank you, though."
you, you should tell people just for fun that you did. I would.
I know.
Yes, yesterday. I knocked that out between sessions.
Well,
Dr.
thank
Megan
you
Pruette,
so much.
thank you. It's really been a pleasure. I hope everyone has enjoyed it as much. I'll just do some sort of quick housekeeping and closing items here. And we look forward to hearing more from you. And certainly, if you are ever interested in coming back and doing another one of these mental health seminars, we'd be glad to have you. Dr. Megan Pruette, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take good care. Okay, so everyone, we promised that we would pop up the CLE credit at the end of the session today. So that is forthcoming here just momentarily. So please stay tuned and watch for that QR code. We also have an our October seminar, which is coming up on sleep and serenity, sleep's impact on our mental health. Please mark the date